O heavenly King, comfort of the Spirit of truth, who art everywhere present and fillest all things, treasure of blessings and giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, O good one. Amen.
Amen.
So, let's see if I can share this.
Oops, let me make sure I give you the co-host here. Okay, should work.
Okay. So before we get started, does anybody have any questions?
Vladika, I just had a quick question.
Sure.
Brent was hoping that I would just find like an actual book that he could touch and feel. So I did end up getting like volume 2 of the how do you pronounce it? Philokalia or Philo?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the one that has the St. Maximus 400 texts on love.
Yep.
But that's still is that a slightly different, I just found like a great bargain on a used version online, so that's why I grabbed it. But is that a slightly different translation than what we're looking at here? This,
It should be identical.
Oh, okay.
Because that's what this is.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we can follow along both on the screen and then using this. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really worthwhile to have that volume and then to read through it and to, read through it, slowly and, really kind of meditate on the content.
Right. Okay.
So what else? Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. So I think this is where we stopped last week, isn't it?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay, or 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Okay, so who would like to read?
I can go.
Okay.
Alex.
Fantastic.
Okay, 60. The passion of self-love suggests to the monk that he should have pity on his body, and in the name of its proper care and governance should take food more often than is fitting. For in this way, self-love will lead him on step by step to fall into the pit of self-indulgence. On the other hand, self-love prompts those who are not monks to fulfill the body's desires at once.
It's, I think, worth noting that self-love or philophtia, as it's in what it is in Greek, is for Maximus is like the key to all the passions. It's kind of the essential underlying passion of so you'll notice that it occurs quite often.
Okay, 61. It is said that the highest state of prayer is reached when the intellect goes beyond the flesh and the world, and while praying is utterly free from matter and form. He who maintains this state has truly attained unceasing prayer.
Yeah. Of course, what he's talking about is ecstatic prayer. And it truly is, it's pure, that's pure noetic prayer. It's completely, there's no form, no images, no words, no thoughts, no nothing. It's just pure, it's just the experience of God.
62. When the body dies, it is wholly separated from the things of this world. Similarly, when the intellect dies, while in that supreme state of prayer, it is separated from all conceptual images of this world. If it does not die such a death, it cannot be with God and live with him. That's the same. That's the noetic.
right?
Right.
In other words, it's self-transcendence is what it's talking about.
63. Let no one deceive you, monk, with the notion that you can be saved while a slave to sensual pleasure and self-esteem.
Self-esteem, again, is vainglory.
When the body sins through material things, it has the bodily virtues to teach it self-restraint. Similarly, when the intellect sins through impassioned conceptual images, it has the virtues of the soul to instruct it, so that by seeing things in a pure and dispassionate way, it too may learn self-restraint. Just as night follows day and winter summer, so distress and pain follow self-esteem and sensual pleasure, either in this life or after death. No sinner can escape future judgment without experiencing in this life either voluntary hardships or afflictions he has not chosen. There are said to be 5 reasons why God allows us to be assailed by demons. The first is that by attacking and counterattacking, we should learn to discriminate between virtue and vice. The second is so that having acquired virtue through conflict and toil, we should keep it secure and immutable. It being the virtue, right?
Uh-huh.
The third is so that when making progress in virtue, we should not become haughty, but learn humility. The fourth is so that having gained some experience of evil, we should hate it with perfect hatred. The fifth and most important is so that having achieved dispassion, we should forget neither our own weakness nor the power of him who has helped us.
I think, you know, the fathers have a saying, there's no salvation without temptation, which sounds kind of neat in Russian, без искушения нет спасения. But it's really it's so important that we work out our salvation through overcoming our passions and through striving to virtue, and so that we can achieve this not only constantly attacking our passions, constantly attacking our sins, and then striving to maintain that virtue that we have achieved, or the virtue that we have attained through conflict and toil, so that it becomes a constant thing in our lives. But we can't become, it's so important also that we not become haughty or conceited is another word that the fathers use, thinking that we have achieved this by ourselves, but rather it's achieved by grace. And here again, and so the fifth point is that having attained to dispassion, we should not forget our own weakness or the power of him who has helped us. In other words, it's by the grace of God that we attain dispassion.
So I have a question, Ludwika. The image of being attacked by demons.
Uh-huh.
Read descriptions, by monks and deep ascetics. That can be a very physical, very immediate, very obvious, literal attacking.
Yes.
Most of us, at least speaking for myself, I haven't ever experienced that, at least not in that sort of overt kind of way. What is that? Because I'm just not sensitive enough to the wiles of Lucifer, or or should I just understand that, like you were saying just a minute ago, the temptations of various kinds, the passions of various kinds, are in fact attacks by demons, and we should think of them that way?
Well, and it's precisely that. I mean, the passions, the temptations are demonic attacks, and we are essentially, every conflict is a judgment on us, as to whether we win or whether we lose, whether we hold forth against the temptation or whether we give in to it. And so, sometimes with these demonic attacks, they're in the form of thoughts most often, and so it's really this is why it's so important to keep watch over our thoughts, because that's the main area that the demons attack us. Now, you've got the stories of like Saint Anthony and many of the other ascetics who talk about a physical attack, but those are for people who are far more spiritually advanced than I am, anyway, and who are, usually who are alone and as solitaries, and essentially they're the kind of they're the SWAT team of the church and of monasticism, that's going out, and the special forces going out to do hand-to-hand combat, and not like the rest of us who rely on their labors to help get us through. So the devil attacks every one of us in one way or another. The question is, how is he attacking us, and what are the reasons that he's attacking us? Very often we have, but very often, quite frankly, the devil doesn't have to worry too hard about it, or doesn't have to work too hard. We usually tempt ourselves plenty, so that he can just kind of ignore us. Speaking for myself, anyway.
Okay, 68. Just as the intellect of a hungry man imagines bread, and that of a thirsty man water, so the intellect of a glutton imagines a profusion of foods, that of a sensualist the forms of women, that of a vain man worldly honor, that of an avaricious man financial gain, that of a rancorous man revenge on whoever has offended him, that of an envious man how to harm the object of his envy, and so on with all the other passions. For an intellect agitated by passions is beset by impassioned conceptual images, whether the body is awake or asleep.
And conceptual images basically is just another way of another term for thoughts, but conceptual images, I think that's a really powerful way of phrasing it, because it is a concept, and yet there's also an image quality to that concept that that we play with in our minds. So anyway.
Radhika,
Yeah.
can I ask a question?
Sure.
It goes back to 66. I didn't quite ask it fast enough, but it talked about voluntary hardships.
Uh-huh.
Can you expand on that a little bit more? I know that, for instance, there's fasting, and some of the saints would go as far as, standing for long periods of time. And I think we're each often experiencing that as we get older, a lot of things become harder, but I'm just sort of, is that to train the body to sort of not give up, or can you say more about that?
Well, yeah, there is that aspect of the voluntary hardships, of voluntarily accepting to do things which are difficult, or which put us in harm's way. For example, for the, you know, if we you know, if we, well, think about it in a, you know, worldly sense as something, you know, somebody goes and runs into a burning building to save a child or to save somebody. And that's kind of voluntary hardship that, you know, that they do. They're putting themselves in the harm's way, or risking being killed for the sake of trying to save another person. If we accept the difficult way of being a confessing Christian, of you know, living our faith and not trying to hide it, and that doesn't mean that we have to go about preaching. You know, we don't have to do a Brother Nathaniel to go out on the street corner with a cross, but rather that we accept, or we know that, you know, that as Christians the world hates us. The world hates what we stand for, and it's completely contrary to what the world stands for, and so just to confess the name of Christ means that we are already subjecting ourselves to the voluntary hardship of rejection, of and all that goes with it. I think then also it's the affliction, he says, without experiencing this life, either voluntary hardships or afflictions that he has not chosen. That, you know, people who've been victimized in various ways, you know, whether it be physical or whether it be in their, you know, career path or whatever, we don't choose to be persecuted. We don't choose generally to be rejected. But if we are and we accept it, we can use it as a means of helping us to work out our salvation. So, in other words, it's a virtuous thing.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we were, okay.
69, I think, right?
Oh, yep.
When desire grows strong, the intellect in sleep imagines things that give sensual pleasure. When the insensitive power grows strong, it imagines things that cause fear. For the impure demons, finding an ally in our negligence, strengthen and excite the passions. But holy angels, by inducing us to perform works of virtue, make them weaker. The passions make the passions weaker.
In other words, ask the help of your guardian angel.
When the desiring aspect of the soul is frequently excited, it implants in the soul a habit of self-indulgence which is difficult to break. When the soul's insensitive power is constantly stimulated, it becomes, in the end, cowardly and unmanly. The first of these failings is cured by long exercise in fasting, vigils, and prayer. The second by kindness, compassion, love, and mercy. The demons fight against us either through things themselves or through our impassioned conceptual images of these things. They fight through things against those who are occupied with things, and through conceptual images against those who are not attached to things.
In other words, if we're attached the things of this world, to material possessions and to relationships and to position and to all of these kinds of things. That's how the demons are going to attack us. If we're not attached, if we're detached from the things of this world, in other words, which is the ideal of state of the monk, then he's going to, then the attacks are going to come mostly through thoughts, through conceptual images.
Just as it is easier to sin in the mind than in action, so warfare through our impassioned conceptual images of things is harder than warfare through the things themselves. Things are outside the intellect, but the conceptual images of these things are formed within it. It is consequently in the intellect's power to make good or bad use of these conceptual images. Their wrong use is followed by the misuse of the things themselves. The intellect receives impassioned conceptual images in three ways: through the senses, through the body's condition, and through the memory. It receives them through the senses when the senses themselves receive impressions from things in relation to which we have acquired passion, and when these things stir up impassioned thoughts in the intellect. Through the body's condition when, as a result either of an undisciplined way of life or of the activity of demons or of some illness, the balance of the elements in the body is disturbed, and again the intellect is stirred to impassioned thoughts or to thoughts contrary to providence. Through the memory, when the memory recalls the conceptual images of things in relation to which we were once made passionate, and so stirs up impassioned thoughts in a similar way. Some of the things given to us by God for our use are in the soul, others are in the body, and others relate to the body. In the soul are its powers. In the body are the sense organs and other members. Relating to the body are food, money, possessions, and so on. Our good or bad use of these things given us by God, or of what is contingent upon them, reveals whether we are virtuous or evil. Of the things contingent upon those given us by God, some are in the soul, some are in the body, and some relate to the body. Those in the soul are spiritual knowledge and ignorance, forgetfulness and memory, love and hate, fear and courage, distress and joy, and so on. Those in the body are pleasure and pain, sensation and numbness, health and disease, life and death, and so on. Those relating to the body are having children or not having children, wealth and poverty, fame and obscurity, and so on. Some of these are regarded as good and others as evil. None of them is evil in itself. According to how they are used, they may be rightly called good or evil. I'm going to break and get a glass of water.
Okay. So this is all pretty clear, isn't it?
Yes.
If it's not, let me know.
Okay, 77.
Go for it.
Both spiritual knowledge and health are good by nature, yet their contraries have been of more benefit to many people. That's curious. But for such knowledge may serve no good purpose where the wicked are concerned, even though, as we have said, it is good in itself. The same is true with regard to health, riches, joy, for they are not used advantageously by such people, but certainly their contraries do benefit them. Therefore, not one of them is evil in itself, even though it may appear to be evil.
That's, well, interesting.
Do not misuse your conceptual images of things, lest you are forced to make a wrong use of the things themselves. For if a man does not first sin in his mind, he will never sin in action. The principal vices, stupidity, cowardice, licentiousness, injustice, are the image of the earthy man. The principal virtues, intelligence, courage, self-restraint, justice, are the image of the heavenly man. As we have borne the image of the earthy, let us also bear the image of the heavenly. If you wish to find the way that leads to life, look for it in the way, who says, I am the way, the door, the truth, and the life. And there you will find it. Only let your search be diligent and painstaking, for few there are that find it. And if you are not among the few, you will find yourself with the many. Five things make a soul cut itself off from sin: fear of judgment, hope of future reward, love of God, and lastly, the prompting of conscience. I counted 4, not 5 there. Some say would be no evil in the created world unless there were some power outside this world dragging us toward evil. But this so-called power is in fact our neglect of the natural energies of the intellect. For those who nurture these energies always do good, never evil. If this then is what you too wish to do, get rid of negligence, and you will also drive out evil, which is the wrong use of our conceptual image of things, followed by the wrong use of the things themselves. In its natural state, the human intelligence is subject to the divine intelligence, and it itself rules over the non-intelligent element in us. Let this order be maintained in all things, and there will be no evil among creatures, nor anything that draws us toward evil. Some thoughts are simple, others are composite. Thoughts which are not impassioned are simple. Passion-charged thoughts are composite, consisting as they do of a conceptual image combined with passion. This being so, when composite thoughts begin to provoke a simple idea in the mind, many simple thoughts may be seen to follow them. For instance, an impassioned thought about gold rises in someone's mind. He has the urge mentally to steal the gold and commits the sin in his intellect. Then thoughts of the purse, the chest, the room, and so on follow hard on the thought of the gold. The thought of the gold was composite, for it was combined with passion. But those of the purse, the chest, and so on were simple, for the intellect had no passion in relation to these things. And the same is true for every thought, thoughts of self-esteem, women, and so on. For not all thoughts which follow impassioned thought are themselves impassioned, as our example has shown. From this, then, we may know which conceptual images are impassioned and which are not. Some say that the demons first touch the genitals during sleep and so arouse the passion of unchastity. Once aroused, the passion by means of the memory brings the form of a woman into the intellect. But others say that the demons appear first to the intellect in the guise of a woman and then excite the appetite by touching the genitals, and so fantasies arise. Yet others say that the passion dominant in the approaching demon stirs the corresponding passion in us, and thus the soul is incited to simple thoughts and brings these female forms into the intellect by means of the memory. The same is true with regard to other impassioned fantasies. Some say they happen in one way, others in another. However, if love and self-control are present in the soul, the demons have no power to arouse any passion at all in any of the ways described, whether the body is awake or asleep. Some commandments of the Mosaic law must be kept both physically and spiritually, others only spiritually. For example, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not kill, you shall not steal, and so on, must be kept both physically and spiritually. The spiritual observance is threefold, as explained below. To be circumcised, to keep the Sabbath, and to slaughter the lamb and eat unleavened bread with bitter herbs and similar injunctions are to be kept only spiritually. There are three main states characterizing the life of the monk. The first consists in not sinning in actions. Second, in not allowing the soul to dally with impassioned thoughts. The third, in being able to contemplate dispassionately in the mind the forms of women and those who have given one offense. A man who is truly without possessions is one who has renounced all his worldly goods and has absolutely nothing on earth except his body, and who, breaking his attachment to the body, has entrusted himself to the care of God and of the devout. Some people with possessions possess them dispassionately, and so when deprived of them, they are not dismayed, but are like those who accepted the seizure of their goods with joy. Others possess with passion, so that when they are in danger of being dispossessed, they become utterly dejected, like the rich man in the gospel who went away full of sorrow. And if they actually are dispossessed, they remain dejected until they die. This possession then reveals whether a man's inner state is dispassionate or dominated by passion. The demons attack the person who has attained the summits of prayer in order to prevent his conceptual images of sensible things from being free from passion. They attack the Gnostic so that he will dally with impassioned thoughts. And they attack the person who has not advanced beyond the practice of the virtues so as to persuade him to sin through his actions. They contend with all men by every possible means in order to separate them from God. Those whom divine providence is leading toward holiness in this life are tested by the following three tests. By the gift of agreeable things such as health, beauty, fine children, money, fame, and so on. By afflictions causing distress such as loss of children, money, and fame. And by bodily suffering such as disease, torture, and so on. To those in the first category, the Lord says, if a person does not forsake all that he has, he cannot be my disciple. And to those in the second and third, he says, you will gain possessions of your souls through your patient endurance. The following four things are said to change the body's temperament and through it to produce either impassioned or dispassionate thoughts in the intellect. Angels, demons, the winds, and diet. It is said that the angels change it by thought, demons by touch, the winds by varying, and diet by the quality of our food and drink and by whether we eat too much or too little. There are also changes brought about by means of memory, hearing, and sight, namely when the soul is affected by joyful or distressing experiences as a result of one of these three means, and then changes the body's temperament. Thus changed, this temperament in its turn induces corresponding thoughts in the intellect.
A question.
Uh-huh.
What is winds? What are we talking about when we say winds?
Well, that's a good question. You know, at that time, I mean, he might very well have been referring to wind, you know, actually to, you know, the air blowing around. And, you know, I mean, but if you think about it, you know, sometimes you can feel it if there's a high pressure or low pressure system coming in, and it changes your temperament. You know, if you get, you know, if your joints become achy because it's too, you know, that kind of thing. You know, this, I mean, it's, you know, he was writing in the 7th century.
Okay.
So they had a whole different set of presuppositions than culturally.
Okay. Thank you, Vladika.
Uh-huh. What else? Anybody else?
The death in the true sense is separation from God, and the sting of death is sin. Adam, who received the sting, became at the same time an exile from the tree of life, from paradise and from God. And this was necessarily followed by the body's death. Life in the true sense is he who said, I am the life, and who, having entered into death, led back to life him who had died. A man writes either to assist his memory or to help others, or for both reasons, or else he writes in order to injure certain people, or to show off, or out of necessity. In Psalm 23, green pasture represents the practice of the virtues, water of refreshment, spiritual knowledge of created. The shadow of death is human life. Therefore, if a man is with God and God is with him, clearly he's able to say, though I walk through the midst of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. A pure intellect sees things correctly. A trained intelligence puts them in order. A keen hearing takes in what is said. He who is lacking in these three qualities insults the person who has spoken. These are sort of sounding like proverbs, aren't they?
They are proverbs, essentially.
Okay.
What this is, it's a collection. It's a collection of sayings that he put together from the literature that was there at the time. So this was written, they think, around I don't know, 625, 630. So it's the fathers that were, you know, had written, and who knows what the other sources are.
98. He who knows the Holy Trinity, the Trinity's creation and providence, and he who has brought his soul's passible aspect into a state of dispassion is with God. So you'll have to help me with that. One is does anybody know the Holy Trinity, and what does passible aspect mean?
Okay, well, I think in the first place, who knows the Holy Trinity, Trinity's creation providence, is, well, our entire experience of God is Trinitarian. We come to know God, we come to believe in God, not simply with our rational mind, but with our noetic sense, our spiritual awareness, spiritual sense, because we have been united in Christ by the Holy Spirit, and He's imparted to us this experience of God, so that we know God as our Father. The Trinity's creation is the created world, and we understand that God created the world through His Son by the Spirit. And providence is God's dispensation, God's plan, if you would. In other words, I think we can better say it's God's grace as it is poured out and sustains all of creation. And so if we know these things, that means that we've brought the rational part of our mind, the rational soul, into subjection to the spiritual. It means that we've attained to a degree of dispassion in which we have conquered the passions, or at least have them under control, and have attained to a level of dispassion. And if we have attained to this this living experience of communion with God, we truly are with God, and not only we are with God, because we are with God regardless, but we're consciously with God. And the whole point of struggling for dispassion, to overcome the passions, and to be able to clear our minds and our hearts, to clear out all of the darkness, the bitterness, the anger, the resentment, the passions, the lust, the envy, and all of that, to clear all that out from our soul, so that we can enter into a state of contemplation without being constantly bombarded with thoughts, that we can push the thoughts completely off to the side and not be bothered with them. And when we do this, this is the gateway into the living experience of communion with God, which is what contemplative prayer is about. So, or Hezekiah. And it's the Jesus prayer that gets us there. Does it make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
99. I'm sorry. Again, in Psalm 23, the rod is said to signify God's judgment, and the staff His providence. So he who has received spiritual knowledge of these things is able to say, "Thy rod and thy staff have comforted me."
This is a perfect example of allegorical interpretation. So,
When the intellect is stripped of passions and illuminated with the contemplation of created things, then it can enter into God and pray as it should. Let me read that once more. When the intellect is stripped of passions and illuminated with the contemplation of created beings, then it can enter into God and pray as it should.
okay, what he's unpacking that, when the intellect is stripped of passions, in other words, it attains to dispassion. In other words, it has complete self-control and is not moved by thoughts. And if the thoughts do come in, they just come in and go out. They just pass through. You don't pay any attention to them, so that there's no attachment to the thought. It's a so that you can think of somebody who hurt you in the past, and there's no emotional reaction, for example. Or you can think of, somebody that, somebody you're lusting after, or you had lusted after in the past, and then there's no emotional reaction. There's no reaction. It's just a thought, and you let it go. That's the intellect stripped of the passions, and illuminated with the contemplation of created beings. Okay, there are two movements in the process. There's the movement of purification, and its reciprocal is illumination. And the purification is from the passions, and so, for example, we identify our passions, we see what they are, and we repent of them. We take it to confession, and then and let it go. We confess it, and we let go of it before God, and in turn, the grace of the Holy Spirit is poured into our soul through that absolution given by the priest, and it illumines us. It's the gift of enlightenment. I like to use the image of if you've ever seen a pack, do you know anyone who are pack rats? Who are where everything is just stuffed. Every square inch, every cubic inch of their house, okay, so think of their garage. Think what the garage must look like. In other words, you walk into the garage and you turn on the light and it doesn't make any difference. I moved into a house like that, by the way. It was awful. So what happens? Where do you start? Well, you start with the first thing at hand, right? It's just otherwise, and so you clean, and then you take it to the dump and get rid of it, right? Well, in the spiritual life, what do? You look at your soul, and it's a mess, and it's all packed with all of these sinful passions, and and resentments and anger and envy and all of this other stuff. And so you start, you dig it out, you repent of it, you take it to confession, and you get rid of it. It's like taking it to the dump. You detach from it. And so the grace of the Holy Spirit comes and illumines you so that you see more of what needs to get dealt with. And so you clean, repent, take it to the dump, and go to confession. And there's more light, and there's more, and there's still more. Eventually you get it cleaned out. It takes time. And so so the stripping of the passions and the illumination, which is by the grace of the Holy Spirit, go together. Now, when we've attained to a level of dispassion, the contemplation of created beings is called natural contemplation, and it's in which we not only can see the grace of God in the creation. It's like all of creation shimmers with God's presence. But you understand the relationship between the created things and God. So that's why I don't in any way dismiss people who say, well, I go to the beach or I go to the forest and that's like a cathedral. It is. If you've attained to natural contemplation, that's absolutely a cathedral. If you're just going to have a picnic, probably not, you know. So, but once you've attained to this experience of natural contemplation, the next thing that opens up is the depths of contemplation of God, and in which you transcend the contemplation of everything material and created, and begin to enter into the world of the immaterial and the uncreated.
Vladika,
Yeah,
I have a question.
sure.
How does this type of dispassion and unattachment to the thoughts differ from the type of goal or experience that people who practice yoga or meditation, are seeking? Like how does, if you ever went to a yoga class, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, they're talking about, empty your mind and you see a thought and you just let it go. And so you're always looking for this way to just kind of observing yourself and letting the thoughts go. How does this differ?
Well, the external form is the same, but the goal and the deeper levels of it are very different. The external form, the external practice is the same, of silencing your mind and letting go of thoughts and things like that. And yoga is very good about, that's what yoga was designed for, to help do that. But where does it take you? If you think you're only contemplating yourself, well, that's got problems in and of itself. If you think you're only contemplating your own mind, but then beyond that, when we go into that level of spiritual awareness, it's very easy to get stuck on the level of the fallen spirits, and on the level of which are the demons. It's also very easy to get stuck on the level of the imagination. And so, especially if you're doing yoga, and especially if you're using, some kind of a mantra, most mantras are invocations of Hindu gods, which are, in our estimation, which are by definition demons. So I don't think you want to be invoking demons. And the whole point of yoga is to open up the chakras and to open up the energy flow within the body. Now, there's a whole medical system there that, that we really don't use in the West, or historically anyway. And it's very efficient for that. On the other hand, I don't think you want to have demons flowing throughout your body. So that's why it's really important to stay away from yoga and things like that. The object for us of contemplation and is to enter into living communion with the Father in the Son by the Spirit. In other words, we go from the Jesus prayer to the prayer of Jesus, where we enter into Jesus's own prayer to the Father, his contemplation of the Father, in which we participate by the grace of the Holy Spirit, by the illumination of our mind by the grace of the Holy Spirit, so that we enter into that flow of love between the three persons of the Trinity. And that's not something objective. It's not like something that we can rationally examine, but rather it becomes an experience of communion. As he says, and then the soul can enter into God and pray as it should. Well, what is prayer in this sense? It means to be completely open to God. Not to think, it's not thinking about God, it's not having images of God, it's not having sensations of God, it's not having ideas about God. It's about formless, wordless, imageless direct experience of communion with the Father in Christ by the Spirit. So that it's the Spirit who prays within us and unites our prayer to that of Christ as he gives thanks to the Father. In other words, it's the same movement as the liturgy.
Is that something that's attainable for everyone? I mean, or is it for just the more advanced in prayer? So if one is able to kind of empty your mind from all images and thoughts and is in a state of prayer, how will one know if they're in communion with God and being enlightened, or whether they're just within themselves? How will one know? Is that something that becomes obvious?
It becomes obvious. It's a state of absolute and complete self-transcendence, and it's a total transcendence of any kind of objective, of subject-object relationship, any kind of I-thou even. Because when one enters into it, there is only God. It's not even me and God, it's God. And it's unmistakable. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now this is like as advanced spirit. This is some of the highest level of spiritual thought, writing, and experience that one can attain to. And it takes a lot of work to get there. And it also takes a lot of grace to get there. And part of that grace is the grace to be able to, and the providence to be able to detach from all of our passions and from all the things that hold us in this world. So really, these centuries, these sayings are really about the spiritual ascent to God through contemplative prayer. And people in the world can do it. If you live a life where there are not lots of distractions, and you can put away the distractions from you, it's very possible. But if you can't put away the distractions, it's going to be really hard. But I think it's really amazing that it's the same movement as the liturgy. To enter into Christ's prayer to the Father by the Holy Spirit, so that we enter into his own self-offering and receive him back again as the very substance of our being. So shall we keep going?
Yes.
Okay. Alex, you want to keep reading, or do you want somebody else to read?
I'd prefer somebody else if we could.
Okay, who's going to volunteer? I even provide the text for you. Hey. Okay. Maximus, do you want to? You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
There we go. Okay. 1. An intelligent use of conceptual images and their corresponding physical objects produces self-restraint, love, and spiritual knowledge. An unintelligent use produces licentiousness, hatred, and ignorance. 2. You have prepared a table for me. Psalm 23:5. In this passage, table stands for the practice of the virtues, for this has been prepared for us by Christ to use against those who afflict us. The oil anointing the intellect is the contemplation of created things. The cup of God is the knowledge of God. His mercy is divine Logos. For through his incarnation, the Logos pursues us all the days until he overtakes all those who are to be saved, as he did in the case of Paul. Philippians 3:12. The house is the kingdom in which all the saints will dwell. Length of days means eternal life. 3. When we misuse the soul's powers, their evil aspects dominate us. For instance, misuse of our power of intelligence results in ignorance and stupidity. Misuse of our insensitive power and our desires produces hatred and licentiousness. The proper use of these powers produces spiritual knowledge, moral judgment, love, and self-restraint. This being so, nothing created and given existence by God is evil.
One thing, comment on this. This passage makes it really important, or makes it really clear that the spiritual disciplines are not there just for the sake of some kind of religious thing. They're there in order to make to transform our whole life and to make our life better, so that we can have that spiritual knowledge, moral judgment, love, and self-restraint, which are virtues in every aspect of life, and which allow us to not only function better in life, but be happy in life, and so I think it's so important to keep in mind that this is not just about religion per se. This is about the totality of how we live, and how we not only how we react to the world, but how our soul reacts to everyone and everything around us, from including God and other people. Okay.
5. Among the demons, says Blessed Dionysius, evil takes the form of mindless anger, desire uncontrolled by the intellect, and impetuous imagination. But mindlessness, lack of intellectual control, and impetuosity in intelligent beings are privations of intelligence, intellect, and circumspection. But a privation is posterior to the possession of something. There was a time, then, when the demons possessed intelligence, intellect, and devout circumspection. This being the case, not even the demons are evil by nature, but they have become evil through the misuse of their natural powers. Some of the passions produce licentiousness, some hatred, while others produce both dispassion and hatred. Dissipation and hatred. 7, overeating and gluttony cause
Overeating.
Overeating and gluttony cause licentiousness. Avarice and self-esteem cause one to hate one's neighbor. Self-love, the mother of vices, is the cause of these things. Self-love is an impassioned, mindless love for one's body. Its opposite is love and self-control. A man dominated by self-love is dominated by all the passions.
I can't help but making a comment here. Part of the, we've been manipulated, through fear because of our mindless love for our bodies and fear for our health. And how easily one can, one manipulates others. But what's interesting, I saw a passage in the Screw Tape Letters of C.S. Lewis, and I don't know, I don't have the English, but it was quoted in Russian, but it talked about, it was this conversation between Screw Tape and his controller demon about how to manipulate people through fear of their health.
Oh.
Very timely. Very timely.
Very timely.
Anyway, so that's as close to politics as I'll get.
Well, it's right on, Ladika.
I notice we don't have masks on.
Oh, heaven forbid.
Okay.
Number 9, no man has ever hated his own flesh, says the apostle, Ephesians 5:29. But he disciplines it and makes it his servant, 1 Corinthians 9:27, allowing it nothing but food and clothing, 1 Timothy 6:8, and then only what is necessary for life. In this way, a man loves his flesh dispassionately and nourishes it and cares for it as a servant of divine things, supplying it only with what meets its basic needs. If man loves someone, he naturally makes every effort to be of service to that person. If then a man loves God, he naturally strives to conform to his will. But if he loves the flesh, he panders to the flesh. Love, restraint, contemplation, and prayer accord with God's will, while gluttony, licentiousness, and things that increase them pander to the flesh. That is why they are in the flesh cannot conform to God's will, Romans 8:8. But they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh together with the passions and desires, Galatians 5:24. 12. If the intellect inclines to God, it treats the body as its servant and provides it with no more than it needs to sustain life. But if it inclines to the flesh, it becomes the servant of the passions and is always thinking about how to fulfill its desires. If you wish to master your thoughts, concentrate on the passions, and you will easily drive the thoughts arising from them out of your intellect. With regard to unchastity, for instance, fast and keep vigils, labor and avoid meeting people. With regard to anger and resentment, be indifferent to fame, dishonor, and material things. With regard to rancor, pray for him who has offended you, and you will be delivered. 14. Do not compare yourself with weaker men, but rather apply yourself to fulfilling the commandment of love. For by comparing yourself with the weak, you will fall into the pit of conceit. But by applying yourself to the commandment of love, you will reach the height of humility. 15. If you totally fulfill the command to love your neighbor, you will feel no bitterness or resentment against him, whatever he does. If this is not the case, then the reason why you fight against your brother is clearly because you seek after transitory things and prefer them to the commandment of love. 16, it is not so much because of need that gold has become an object of desire among men, as because of the power it gives most people to indulge in sensual pleasure. 17, there are three things which produce love of material wealth: self-indulgence, self-esteem, and lack of faith. Lack of faith is more dangerous than the other two. 18, the self-indulgent person loves wealth because it enables him to live comfortably. The person full of self-esteem loves it because through it he can gain the esteem of others. The person who lacks faith loves it because, fearful of starvation, old age, disease, or exile, he can save it and hoard it. He puts his trust in wealth rather than in God, the Creator who provides for all creation down to the least of living things. 19, there are four kinds of men who hoard wealth: the three already mentioned and the treasurer or bursar. Clearly, it is only the last who conserves it for a good purpose, namely, so as always to have the means of supplying each person's basic needs.
In other words, the econom of the monastery, the guy who distributes the cash according to people's needs.
20, all impassioned thoughts either stimulate the soul's desiring power or disturb its insensate power or darken its intelligence. It is in this way that the intellect's capacity for spiritual contemplation and for the ecstasy of prayer is dulled. For this reason, a monk, especially the hesychast, must pay close attention to such thoughts, searching out and eliminating their causes. For example, the soul's power of desire is stimulated by impassioned thoughts of women. Such thoughts are caused by intemperance in eating and drinking, and by frequent and senseless talk with women in question, and they are cut off by hunger, thirst, vigils, and withdrawal from human society. Again, the insensate power is disturbed by impassioned thoughts about those who have offended us. This is caused by self-indulgence, self-esteem, and love of material things, for it is on account of such vices that the passion-dominated man feels resentment, being frustrated or otherwise failing to attain what he wants. These thoughts are cut off when the vices provoking them are rejected and nullified through the love of God.
So what he's talking about is, is this this ancient model of the soul with three aspects to it. There's the intelligent, the insensitive, which means the desiring, or rather the, there's the desiring and the insensitive, which is the power of anger, essentially. And the soul is composed essentially of these three aspects. And then one can also say that that's the passible soul. Then there's the impassible soul, which is the noetic or impassible aspect of the soul, which is the noetic, which is that which perceives God directly. When the noetic aspect of the soul becomes darkened, it's because it's being distracted by these other powers of the soul, the insensitive and the desiring, and of course there is also the darkening of the intelligence as well, through thoughts. So all in all, our battle is against thoughts, and learning how to learning how to deal with them. And, you know, that's about 90% of the spiritual literature right there.
21, God knows himself, and he knows the things he has created. The angelic powers too know God and know the things he has created, but they do not know God and the things he has created in the same way that God knows himself and the things he has created.
This is important, because the angels are of a different, and this is really important in view of some ancient ideas that angels are and even souls are like sparks of the divinity and things like that. It's not true. The angels are created beings, and souls, human souls, are also created beings. And the noetic realm, in other words, the spiritual realm, which consists of angels and souls as well as demons, because their demons are fallen angels, exists. It exists, and it's within the created order, and exists in a way completely differently from God. As St. Gregory of Nyssa said, which I like to quote, if God exists, we don't. And if we exist, God doesn't. Because how we exist and how God exists are two absolutely radically different things. And so we can't begin to conceive of how God exists. And so also even with the angels, although they're close to him and serve him and contemplate him and see him, they can't conceive of God either. And you know, it's this apophatic element of our theology, which you can see is St. Maximus is one of the greatest of the ancient fathers. But what he did was he synthesized a lot of the writings of the earlier fathers. But you can see how important this apophatic element is, that God is utterly beyond our ability to conceive or describe or understand him. And yet he revealed himself in Jesus Christ. So, and through contemplation, through entrance into the depths of prayer, we can come to know the God who is, as it says in the liturgy, ineffable, inconceivable, invisible, incomprehensible, ever existing, and eternally the same. And that's pretty awesome. So
23, although the intellect apprehends.
Let's do 22.
Oh, 22? God knows himself. Oh, okay, I did skip. I'm sorry. God knows himself through knowing his blessed essence, and the things created by him he knows through knowing his wisdom, by means of which and in which he made all things. But the angelic powers know God by participation. Though God himself transcends such participation, and the things he has created they know by apprehending that which may be spiritually contemplated in them. 23, although the intellect apprehends its vision of created things within itself, they are actually outside it. This is not the case with respect to God's knowledge of created things, for he is eternal, infinite, and undetermined, and has bestowed on everything that exists its being, well-being, and eternal being. 24, nature endowed with intelligence and intellect participate in God through their very being, through their capacity for well-being, that is, for goodness and wisdom, and through the grace that gives them eternal being. This, then, is how they know God. They know God's creation, as we have said, by apprehending the harmonious wisdom to be contemplated in it. This wisdom is apprehended by the intellect in a non-material way and has no independent existence of its own. 25. When God brought into being natures endowed with intelligence and intellect, he communicated to them in his supreme goodness 4 of the 5 attributes which he sustains, protects, and preserves created things. These attributes are being, eternal being, goodness, and wisdom. Of the 4, he granted the first 2, being and eternal being, to their essence, and to the second 2, goodness and wisdom, to their volitive faculty, so that what he is in his essence, the creatures may become by participation. This is why man is said to have been created in the image and likeness of God. He is made in the image of God, since his being is in the image of God's being, and his eternal being is in the image of God's eternal being. And in that sense, in the sense that, though not without origin, it is nevertheless without end. He is also made in the likeness of God, since he is good in the likeness of God's goodness, and wise in the likeness of God's wisdom. God being good and wise by nature, and man by grace. Every intelligent nature is in the image of God, but only the good and the wise attain his likeness.
Okay, this is enough for a whole class.
Yeah.
That one paragraph.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's stop here for the evening. Oops. Okay. So, okay. Let's see. Okay, everything that God created that has intellect and intelligence, in other words, human beings and angels, have these essential attributes: being, eternal being, goodness, and wisdom. Being an eternal being are aspects of the essence of noetic being. Goodness and wisdom have to be actualized by the will, the volitive faculty, so that by actualizing and moving from a state of simply of being into eternal being, we attain to likeness of God by participation through moral action and which is participation and acting according to goodness and to wisdom. Thus, these are the image and likeness of God in the human being. There are many, the fathers have many ways of expressing this sense of that the image and likeness of God is inherent in human persons. This is only one of them, but this is a very kind of prevalent theme in the later fathers. Our being is the image of God's being, in other words, that we exist, and our eternal being, in other words, is the image of God's eternal being in potentiality. image, the quality of the image of God within us lies in its potentiality. In other words, it has to be actualized. Has to be actualized through through goodness and through wisdom. In other words, not only being like God in essence, as a created reflection of God's essence and being, but through wisdom and goodness, actualizing that likeness to God, which is the fulfillment of the potential that God gives to each person. God gives the full potential to attain to eternal life to each person, but we have to seize it. We have to actualize it by participation in grace, by synergy with God's will, by conforming ourselves to the will of God, and thus through our action, likening ourselves to God. Or, as he says in the last sentence of that paragraph, every intelligent nature is in the image of God, but only the good and the wise attain his likeness. So, goodness and wisdom, that's our task.
Vladika?
Yeah.
Question. So, in our fallen state, then, would it be accurate to say then that the image is intact as it was created, and that parts of us that are flawed, or the parts that are up to the action of our will and the extent to which we achieve or don't achieve the goodness and wisdom, or use of goodness and wisdom to attain his likeness, is the thing that's in flux?
Yeah, we absolutely affirm that the image of God is intact in each person, because that's our very essence, is to be the image of God. Now, the Calvinists and even Roman Catholicism pushes this direction, that through their doctrines, especially the Calvinists, through the doctrine of total depravity, that the image of God was extinguished in the human person. And we absolutely reject that. That's never been part of our theology. It's never been part of the patristic, much less apostolic understanding of the human person. And so, what does that mean on another level? It means that for every human person, the image of God is perfect within them, and that at the heart of each person is that part of them which cannot be touched by the world, no matter how broken, no matter how disfigured, no matter how despised, no matter how rejected, no matter what. At the very heart of each person is something divinely beautiful. And this is the reason why, one of the reasons why we're so adamantly pro-life. That each soul, each human soul, each person who is conceived has the image of God and the fullness of that potential within them. And so it's so important for us to honor that image of God within each person, because not only should we love them, we should love them and enter into God's love for them as well. Because God's love for each one of us is infinite. So I think this is one of the essential aspects of orthodoxy that that differentiates us from from Protestantism. You know, this very positive image, or this very positive understanding of the human person and of human nature. Now, we're fallen, we're subject to the passions, and that's because we sin in the likeness of Adam. You can't say Adam was born with fallen human nature, right? It doesn't work that way. Of course, Adam wasn't born, right? But Adam, you know, the whole point is that each person has the potential for eternal life, and to be likened to God, and to liken themselves to God through moral action, through uniting our will to God's will, through conforming, through synergy, through conforming our will to God's will and acting together with, in cooperation with, which is what synergy really means, in cooperation with God. And what is God's will? It's his goodness, it's his love, it's his compassion, it's his mercy, it's, you know, that's God's energy. And so this I think is one of the key elements in understanding orthodoxy as opposed to, say, Western Christianity, which has a very negative aspect towards human nature. So,
Radhika, really quick on this
Sure.
topic. Speaking of this, one of the things that we were introduced to, we were still very immersed in our Calvinist beliefs like many years back, and it was through this Anglican church and going through the theology of the body. Are you familiar with Pope John Paul's theology of the body? And it was quite revolutionary for us, and it taught us, you know, essentially, well, at least the Roman Catholic view on creation. And I find it to be really beautiful. And I'm wondering I've always wondered if the Orthodox has or is it just kind of woven through Orthodox thought and theology and writings, this, like what you just described about the Orthodox, historically the Orthodox view of creation, and
it's woven through it.
Yeah.
You know, Pope John Paul's encyclical, I mean, that was an important document. I've read parts of it. I haven't read the whole thing. But it's pretty good. It's really good, actually. And there's a lot in there we can absolutely affirm.
Right. Yes, I think there's a lot of
Yeah, but in the Calvinism was, you know, it was both Luther and Calvin had real problems, and their theology just radically distorted. Not only the theology of the body, but the whole attitude toward sexuality, towards I mean, everything connected with human life, actually. And so, in the Orthodox tradition, the Orthodox theological tradition, it's a far healthier, in my opinion, it's a far healthier approach
Mhm.
to understanding the nature of human being,
Mhm.
and a very positive approach. Besides the Western, I find the Western approach to be really depressing, you know. So, any other questions? Cassandra, you look like you have a question.
No, I don't, Vladika. I'm just absorbing everything. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this is all part of your catechesis. Saint Maximus is quite a catechist.
Yeah, it's high level stuff. It's really good. It really makes you have to think, which is great.
So you must have a good theological background.
I wish I could say that I do, but I don't.
So some background reading that I would really suggest, and it would be very good for your catechesis, would be a book by Metropolitan Hilarion Alfeev called The Mystery of the Faith.
Okay.
St. Vladimir's Press. It's really outstanding, and you know, that also, follow the footnotes. It'll lead you to all sorts of other stuff.
So, The Mystery of the Faith by Hilarion
Alfeev, Alfeyev. He's the #2 guy in the Russian Orthodox Church.
Got it.
So, all right.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything before we sign off? All right, let's pray. It is truly meet to bless thee, O Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure, and the mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without corruption thou gavest birth to God the Word. True Theotokos, we magnify thee. The blessing of the Lord be upon you through his grace and love for mankind, always now and ever and into ages of ages.
Amen.